Education Neighborhood Committee to order. It's February 17th, Tuesday, and we have a quorum. All members are present, Ms. Martinez and Mr. O'Farrell, myself, Bernard Parks, as the chair. We get started on the agenda.
Sure. Item number 1 is continued from November 19th, 2013. It's a verbal status report from the General Manager, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, pursuant to motion Reiser Parks, relative to the potential policy changes under the Neighborhood Council system to petition the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners for a subdivision or adjustment of district boundaries for the purposes of better representation.
Let me just make one announcement for those that are here and you've not been here before. Ensure that if you're here on an item, that you put a card in if you wish to speak. If there's no items on the agenda that you want to speak to and it's within the purview of this committee, you can put in a public comment card, which we'll deal with at the end of the meeting. Okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Gracie Lee, General Manager for the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. In regards to subdivision policy and the proposal, there have been a few changes since the last report that came before the committee in regards to the fiscal impact. Just briefly, we currently have 96 neighborhood councils. We just certified a new one in South LA in the last few weeks. And if this subdivision policy were to go through, which I do think that it is necessary to have a subdivision policy of some sort, the impact that it could potentially have on the number of neighborhood councils is something that needs to be considered just because of our ability to support the neighborhood council system and not only the department's ability but also Office of the City Attorney, as they also have staffing that is there to support neighborhood councils as well. When we looked at the 96 neighborhood councils and the population, it currently takes 20,000 residents to form a neighborhood council, and excluding the exception. So if we look,
what is the exceptions to be under 20,000?
To be under 20,000, it's typically a specialized area, could be geographical, such as Elysian Valley, Riverside. They have about 6,000 folks because geographically they're isolated. So if they can show that that population in that area couldn't reach 20,000, however, they have an area that should be certified as their own neighborhood council, we can certify them in those circumstances. So out of the 96, if the subdivision were to go through just based on the current residential numbers, 42 neighborhood councils could subdivide once. 13 neighborhood councils could actually subdivide into 3 neighborhood councils, and there'd be 4 that would be able to subdivide into 4 neighborhood councils.
Based on the 20,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And there could potentially be smaller areas that could subdivide based on the exception. So that would equal about 155 new potential neighborhood councils. And the numbers in our report did provide up to 150 neighborhood councils if we were to have staffing of 1 to 10 neighborhood councils. That would basically increase our current budget from $2.5 to about $4.5 million, and that's just on salaries, no pension or any of the other costs associated with that. There has been a change in our staffing as well. At the time of the original report, we had eight neighborhood empowerment advocates or analysts, and these are specific to the field and support the neighborhood councils in the field. Out of those, we are now down 2. One is also in funding, so we only have 5 neighborhood empowerment analysts for the 96 neighborhood councils currently. The issue that has also come up is that the department needs exempt positions, and because of the citywide cap on exempt positions, we've had issues filling our current exemptions. So out of the 26 authorized position authorities for this current fiscal year, we only have 17 that are filled, and out of those we require ideally 11 exemptions, but we are in the process of trying to figure out how we can get those exemptions given the citywide cap. So we would have to find some type of solution for the department in terms of getting additional exempt positions should we try to staff up in order to implement this policy. Even if the policy didn't take it, I mean, even if we didn't have all the neighborhood councils try to subdivide at once to the 155 level, even if we just had a handful of neighborhood councils that were to try to subdivide, we would likely have to have more staffing for that. And because our staffing is specialized, typically with a community organizing background, it's very difficult to find civil service classifications that would have this type of skill set. So we would actually, if this were to go forward, probably need to look at some more analysis in regards to not only our staffing, but Office of the City Attorney.
Okay. Let me ask you, there's other than using the 20,000 number, then there is no real max, because you may have some isolated neighborhoods that go beyond just using the 20,000 figure?
That's correct. In terms of the exception, yes, there is the exception that might allow for even additional neighborhood councils to be formed.
Okay. The other issue is that it appears that you asked for additional position, and it was granted, but it appears there's a problem with the exemption.
That's correct.
What is that problem?
So the department, we're very specialized in our work, and what we've discovered in the last few years is that even when we've been fortunate enough to get position authorities, when they've been civil service positions, we don't have many candidates who want to come to the department because we do end up being highly political. As it is a smaller department as well, there's not as many opportunities to promote. So we don't have many candidates coming in with civil service, from the civil service positions. So we've try to make our positions exempt whenever possible. However, we are now bumping up against the issue of the citywide total exemptions of 200, and we've been working with the mayor's office and CAO, LA, and the personnel department to try to resolve this matter, because currently 6 of our positions are exempt, the vacancies, and so we can't even fill those right now.
Okay. Is there any additional rationale of coming up with smaller numbers other than better representation, or is there any other criteria that's demanded of the neighborhood councils if they want to make that decision?
There is, and I think if City Attorney can weigh in. There's a few other criteria in addition to a historical area or geographically isolated areas.
Yes, Deputy City Attorney Darren Martinez. Yes, it has to fit the following criteria: that it's separated from an adjacent community by significant geographic features. The proposed area is identified by name within any of the 36 adopted community plan areas of the City Planning Department, or the proposed area represents a historic, identifiable neighborhood or community that is serviced by city service providers such as a public library, park, recreation center, fire, police station, or public school. So that exception could be particularly broad.
Is that criteria as part of an ordinance, or is that?
Yes, both the ordinance and the plan for a citywide system of neighborhood councils.
Okay. Ms. Martinez, you have any questions? Okay. Let me just ask you a couple of more on this. Is that being that these can be done at any time and people could make a decision or as a group, they'd have financial impact. Is there any consideration of having these considerations done at a certain point in the fiscal year so that they can be part of the budget process, so it's not that applications are accepted, say, the second quarter of each fiscal year to be evaluated and decision made before the budget process starts or something? Has that been considered?
There is no, in the existing proposal, there's no such consideration. We could add it in, but currently there isn't. And in fact, once the department receives a application, we are under strict timelines to get it processed pretty much as soon as possible. So we would have to change that part of the ordinance as well.
Have we discussed this with any neighborhood councils to see if what number might be interested in this, or because most of our data is just evaluating if it's 20,000 at a max, these are the number that could produce. Have we been advised by neighborhood councils that there's a great interest in this?
I only know of 2 neighborhood councils currently that are really interested in pursuing subdivision at this point. It doesn't mean, though, that once the policy is passed, this provision is passed, that other neighborhood councils would want to take advantage of possibly increased funding for their areas and would go ahead and proceed with subdivision.
Okay. Let me ask you Gracie, before we go to public comment.
Sure. So do we have an anticipated number of neighborhood councils that want to subdivide and the potential fiscal impact and management impact that it would have?
Sure. So there are 2 that I know of in terms of 2 areas within a neighborhood council that have actively pursued subdivision or some type of ability to create their own neighborhood council. There have been other neighborhood councils that have mentioned it. However, because there was no option, a viable option, we've not received any other feedback. Would I think once this policy is in place, that other neighborhood councils would want to, as I mentioned before, 42 of them would be able to subdivide, and of those 42, many could subdivide into 3 or 4 councils.
And how much would it cost to conduct an election in an event of a subdivision? Do you have a sense?
So for us, it states election. However, I could check with city attorney on this. My understanding is that we will likely have to do a selection instead, because a selection, which is basically a non-secret vote, it's like a town hall where people just raise their hands instead of a secret ballot, because elections are only conducted in even number of years between the department and the city clerk. So with selections, the department takes that burden on completely. So we assist neighborhood councils in doing their selections. So it would be added resources on the department in order to conduct those selections.
And since you're already currently understaffed, what future staffing may be required as a result of subdivisions?
If this policy were to go through now and there were neighbor councils that would immediately, even if the 2 started, we would need just additional staffing just to assist with that. As I mentioned before, we only have 5 field staff for 96 neighborhood councils. And so we would, again, need to have staffing, at least 1 or 2 folks just to implement this, because we're supposed to basically handhold any certifying group and help them with bylaws and outreach and do all those things. And it's quite a lengthy process. And the issue with the exempt positions would also need to be handled as well.
And my last question is, do you know if the commission is working on a policy should conflict arise between the existing neighborhood council and, subdivision group?
This policy or this proposal encompasses the commission's entire policy, and I believe that they thought that if the election, if there was an election held, or selection rather, held in that area, that the stakeholders themselves would make that ultimate decision. Although we do anticipate that there would be conflict, so the department would likely have to step in and assist in mediation of try to resolve it as easily as we can.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Gracie. Question: at the Bonk regional hearings that were held over a period of months, they took responses and from the neighborhood councils, and 38% of the responses indicated opposition to the subdivision policy. Are there some common themes that emerged from that as to why the opposition?
I think that from what our understanding from the opposition, there was basically some neighborhood councils who felt like there would be some areas within their group that might want to split, and that, you know, they were adamant that the original certified neighborhood council represented their community in the best manner. And I do believe it's mostly along those lines. I know there's community impact statements from those fearless neighborhood council as well. They mentioned that, but they also mentioned the fiscal impact as well. So those were the two themes.
And how about the reverse? So the responses were more favorable to supporting this. What are some of the themes that emerged from that?
I think it was the understanding that after next year will be 15 years when first neighborhood councils are certified, that communities change, and that the needs of each community has evolved. I mean, if you look at downtown LA neighborhood council, that's very typical in terms of, 15 years ago, totally different, right? So that there should be a way to subdivide an existing neighborhood council without having to voluntarily decertify and recreate those neighborhood councils, because there will be a lag in services while the neighborhood council is decertified.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gracie, why don't you have a seat? We're going to bring up public comment. We have roughly 15 or 16 cards for public comment. We're going to give 1 minute per card because we have a number of items on the agenda today. And Ms. Martinez has another committee meeting very shortly. So if you feel compelled to come up when we call your name, come up to the front row. The other thing would be helpful if you have comments that you'd like to present in writing, make a community impact on this item. It'd be very helpful to assist Gracie as we're developing this policy. So first of all, Martin from CD 14, if you can come up. The next seat, Tut Hayes. The next seat, Clifford Mosley. The next seat, Christopher Garcia. So if you can all come up and have a seat. And
thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Martin Schlager with Councilman Weezar's office. We sought clarification about the policy to when neighborhood councils asked about potential subdivision. We're not here in support of any particular subdivision proposal, but instead the work of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, which developed this clarification. And we believe in that process that was developed through BUNC, but also then that neighborhood councils would have to go through to subdivide. And I think that process is of sufficient thoroughness that we would get a heads up of additional councils that may exist. If 38% had said they don't want that process, they're likely to stay together. And we should use our budget process to deal with the fiscal impacts, and we should use our...
Excuse me. Mr. Hayes, are you waiving your speaking time? Are you waiving your speaking time? Because you're up next. I called you for the second seat there. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to close out then, I would say where there's fiscal impacts, I would encourage us to use our budget process that's already in place. Where there's personnel impacts, or in fact the existing need to deal with Dunn's personnel issues, perhaps through the Personnel Committee we could get some cooperation to set forth a path for that. And I encourage you to move this forward so that we can have clarification for our neighborhood councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Hayes?
Irreconcilable differences. That's not noted in this first item, but it's on the agenda for grievances. Our council is needing succession. There's a civil war on succession. And we might have a war unless the succession takes place. It's a life and death issue. There's a train coming down Crenshaw Boulevard that will kill our kids at Crenshaw High School and another high school. In regards to education in high school, this council objected to having a new school built because it would cause too much traffic. What kind of thinking is that? In our neighborhood, too much traffic for education? So we want to divide and separate because we want to separate because of the irreconcilable differences. These people are not intelligent or moral thinkers. They don't quite understand what the importance of living without trains killing us and other things. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's see, Mr. Mosley, before you get started, let me ask two more speakers, Fernando, is it Rivas, and Alex Bowman to come up and fill the first two chairs. Mr. Mosley.
All right. My name is Clifford Mosley. I'm the founder, executive director of LA International Charter High School. I spoke here at the last time this committee met. And it's not a life and death issue, but it's an important issue that I'm here to talk to you about. You know, we are in support of the process to be able to subdivide neighborhood councils. I think that you know, they've been around for, like, as the general manager stated, for about 15 years now. So just like in the founding of this country, you know, they start off the Articles of Confederation, then they reviewed it and they changed things around. I think that's where we're at right now. We really need to see what's been working, what hasn't, and obviously some of these neighborhood councils cobbled together at the time, and now it's the time to visit it and see how we can subdivide some of it as necessary. What I would like to also talk about is also the time process. The last time I was here, I just noticed on the date was in November of 2013. Now we're in the middle of February of 2015. So that's one thing we really need to work on, is somehow get that process rolling before, you know, we're dead. All right, thank you.
Hopefully you won't die in this room. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, hello. My name is Christopher Garcia, and I am a current student at Laches, Los Angeles International High School. I am a senior. And we support the subdivision because, you know, we're looking forward to our school neighborhood having its own council. I think it brings great benefits. You know, for example, a great one would be having the, you know, the youth or underage, you know, actually being able to vote for representatives for our own, you know, for our own neighborhood and our communities and stuff like that. And I think that's a great idea. Me being a senior, you know, being my voice being heard actually, and I just think that's an amazing opportunity for us to have. So I dearly support this, and hope it happens soon.
Thank you very much. If we can get those two seats and ask
Thank you.
Wendy
Thank you very much.
Reiser and Carolyn Daniels to come up, and we can start over here. First seat.
Hi, Darren. I'm Fran Arrivas, and I come from the school HS2 as well. I am a senior, and well, you know, I really, as Chris was saying, I really believe in that we should have the right, because we would really like our school to be part of a neighborhood council that allows us to take part in decisions, because, you know, as growing up, many of us have to make decisions, and being able to make those really gives you confidence, like, and it helps you become, you know, just part of the community, because as a community, you can really accomplish a lot, because not one person can accomplish a lot of things. Well, they can, but it takes a lot of work, but I believe working together and getting everyone together will really help a lot. And to prepare us for being completely empowered citizens in just a few years, this will really help. But in an area that would only come to subdivision, there are just too many people afraid to listen to the youth for our community right now. And honestly, I think we should listen to the youth because they have a lot to offer. And, well, you know, just thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bowman.
Hi, I'm Alex Bowman. I'm an associate pastor. And the reason why I'm here is I'm part of a community, and what has happened is a lot of smaller communities in our area have joined together to become one neighborhood council. And at this point, it doesn't make sense for us to be in communities that are so different from ours. So in the beginning, it made sense for us to come together. There are several smaller communities, and we needed to represent ourselves to the neighborhood the city council. But at this point, it makes sense for us to be able to be separate. The communities are just too different, and we don't want to go through an exhaustive effort of having to close down the neighborhood council at this point. City services are doing a good job, but we want a smooth process to be had for our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could have those two seats, Mr. Joseph Reiser and Leonard Schaeffer can come up in the first two seats.
Hi, I'm Wendy Reiser. As Alex was saying, it was about 13 years ago when a coalition of 6 different neighborhoods decided to join and be one neighborhood council for certification. However, at that time, very few people in our neighborhood knew anything about neighborhood councils. It was actually decided by about 3 people. But over the last 7 to 8 years, a much larger and more representative group of people have become involved. And it's because we dug deeper and we consistently reached out to our neighborhood. We take flyers to every residence in our neighborhood before a meeting. And because of that, we have about 40 to 50 people regularly at our meetings, stakeholders, at our local meetings, as contrasted to the other communities within our neighborhood council that sometimes really struggle to even make quorum of 6. I guess that's
Finish your thought.
Okay. Let's see. For the last 2012 election, our community recruited nearly half of the total board candidates just from our neighborhood, which would have resulted in the most diverse board to ever have served our neighborhood council. If we had this subdivision policy, we would finally acknowledge growth and empowerment and allow our neighborhood to speak for itself directly to city government.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels?
I'm Carolyn Daniels. I support City Council adopting this policy that allows neighborhood councils to subdivide. I believe it is a basic right guaranteed to them from the beginning. In his motion thank you, I couldn't do that. In his motion to the City Council that helped move the discussion of subdividing neighborhood councils to the forefront, Council Member Huizar pointed out that one benefit of finally creating a subdivision policy would be to enable better representatives of the stakeholders. Supporting that idea, current volunteer neighborhood council board members, based on the average board size, it just astounds me, can each represent from 4,000 to 5,000 people. In our smaller councils, it would be more like 1,000 to 2,000. Having taught for LAUSD,
You finish your thought.
for 39 years, I'm aware of the benefit to children and teachers alike for the smaller ratio. I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you very much. If we could have those 2 seats, and Mr. Handel and Mr. Spiegel could come up in those 2 seats. Mr. Reiser, you can start your comment.
Thank you. I take it from some of the comments and some of the questions of the council members, and thank you for raising them, that you see that there is a wide possibility of lots of neighborhood councils being started, but there isn't a very good likelihood of it. And even if there are, they would be limited by a lot of the structure and limited to a few. But what I want to talk to you about is maybe a bumper sticker, and it could be used for anything that's good, that should happen, but might get carried away, and that's limitation, not elimination. So far, this has been eliminated for 12 to 14 years. It could be limited to a small number of neighborhood councils allowed to do this each year, as much as the city could handle, as much as the department could handle. And if you do that, you can also use the funds that go back to the department every year from councils that can't spend their money. Every year, $300,000 to $400,000 goes back to the council. It could be used to fund new ones the following year if you allow that limitation. That also helps the staff. And the staff shouldn't be worried about new councils needing a lot of hand-holding, because most of these new councils that are emerging out of existing ones are made up of people that have already run neighborhood councils, and they will not need a lot of hand-holding.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schaeffer?
That's Leonard Schaeffer, representing Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. Back in October of 2013, we sent this committee a letter with regards to our support for the proposed ordinance because it came out of our working groups. I would point out that there would be a process. That process is basically the same as forming a new neighborhood council, but with perhaps a kicker, and that is that everybody within the boundaries of the existing neighborhood council would have to be convinced that it should happen, much like a city seceding, an area seceding from Los Angeles, let's say. So that would take an awful lot of work, so I don't expect to see it. Plus, there's a certain amount of discretion placed with the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners as to whether or not this is a proper subject for the formation of a new neighborhood council. So I think those two things would be very limiting in scope, along with the process of getting 20,000 and such as that.
Okay, thank you. The next two speakers come up, General Jeff and Arthur Yoramello. Mr. Handler.
Yes, Jay Handel, co-chair of the Budget Advocates. I want to go back and reiterate that you really need to have a fiscal impact report. Knowing what we've been fighting for with the department and the lack of funds now and the lack of staff now, and every one of you, 15, hear every day from your stakeholders about dysfunctional neighborhood councils that are fighting and having issues, but nothing we can do about it because we don't have the staff. Having said that, doing subdivisions, I will tell you, will double the number of councils you have. Talking to people out on the west side, people that have 70, 80, 90, 100,000 people, they're all going to go for the money, which means $37,000 for each new neighborhood council, new staffing in the department, additional staffing for elections. This has to be better thought out than anything we've done before, because we're going to be looking at least doubling the budget for the department, plus doubling the budget for the neighborhood councils that are going to be coming in. So you're looking at about a $6 million impact right off the bat. So again, I would urge you to do and have the CLA and the CAO do a complete fiscal impact report on this before you do any decision-making on a fiscal matter like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. I'm going to piggyback on what Jay Handel said. You know, I have no problem with local representation.
Just say your name for the
record. Ivan Spiegel. I mean, this country was founded, one of the principles that caused us to split off from England was about local representation. So in terms of principle, I have no problem with that. I think it's great. The problem is the money. Right now, there's a process that all these groups that feel they're not being represented by a larger council, they can form a community council. It costs them nothing. They don't have to deal with the Brown Act. They don't have to deal with their posting. They don't have to deal with the department's regulations. They can just go out and start representing their community right now. Why aren't they doing it? My guess is because of the measly $37,000 that we're all struggling to work within. There must be some guarantee that if new councils are allowed to form, it doesn't deplete the pot of money that the rest of us are operating under, or else we're all going to flounder.
Thank you. All right, let me see the next two speakers who come, Rick Young and Dan Garza.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is General Jeff. I am the chair of the Skid Row Neighborhood Council Formation Committee, and we definitely are not in agreement with the previous speakers, because in Skid Row, $37,000 is not nearly enough to address our issues. We've been a part of the Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council since its inception, since 2002, and in 13 years, our community still looks the same. We need our own neighborhood council to address our issues and needs. And, you know, we will not be, it is not in our best interest to be left to, within the Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. The problem with that, well, we do support the subdivision. The problem with that is that the language as it sits right now is not in our best interest, because the voters would be those in the Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council boundaries, and many of them have never been to Skid Row. They're not familiar with Skid Row's needs and issues, and they should not have a determination on Skid Row's fate. We feel that the amendment should be made, if I can conclude, we feel that amendment should be made to where the applying neighborhood councils have the option to either go with the vote that is on the books right now, or have an option of the vote actually just being within the boundaries of the applying neighborhood council. And in our case, that the vote should come down to the Skid Row community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Arthur Jaramillo, and I'm currently in a neighborhood council that can't seem to get anything done because it's like dysfunctional. Instead of working on suggestions and ideas to fix the community, they're constantly fighting. And to support the split up or making your own neighborhood council from your own ideas and the people that you live with in your community. They come up with different ideas, and I think that if we had a chance to split, and it was obviously able to do that, that we would be able to make decisions for ourselves instead of having to worry about what other people in other neighborhoods want to do for themselves, and therefore not getting anything done in the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go next, Ms. Yvonne Michelle Archery, come up. Mr. Young.
Rick Young, 9-year resident of Skid Row, and the residents and the homeless of Skid Row support item number 1, subdivision, because we know from personal experience that the only way, I'm telling you, the only way that Skid Row is going to improve and get better is if the residents and the homeless of Skid Row are able to call their own shots. It's called counterinsurgency in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I'm telling you that the counterinsurgency is happening right now. We have grassroots leadership. We have Mr. General Jeff Page and people like that who are willing to stand up and lead. So give us that opportunity. We're not asking for your help. We're asking for your confidence in us. We can do it. Thank you.
Mr. Garza.
Don Garza. This whole issue and matter for Skid Row is about one thing. As a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and having earned a combat action ribbon, and having survived 2 minefields and a CEO that saved my life who earned 2 Silver Stars, I understand how important it is to back the Constitution of the United States, specifically the First Amendment. This is autonomy. People have a right to be able to have and voice their concerns and not be filtered through someone else. I was there in 2002 when we certified the Neighborhood Council for downtown Los Angeles. What I am seeing right now is a part of my legacy, which was to make sure that the people in Skid Row got to play at the same table with everyone else, learn the rules of the game, and grew up. Now, it is time for Skid Row to be allowed to grow up and not to be patronized. This is autonomy at its best. We can move forward with this. We can change the community. We can allow it no longer to be a policy, but an organic community to begin to be created from within or not. Thank you.
I'd just like to applaud the efforts of General Jeff, Don Garza, and everyone from the community who you cannot ignore. As a 12-year stakeholder in the downtown Los Angeles area, I'd like to point out that consistently the city and the county has ignored Skid Row as if it does not exist. I was born in Inglewood as black people, people of color, impoverished people. We are used to this. This is why we are asking you to give us the opportunity to separate so that we can begin to continue in the effort to clean our streets, to create community building, positive activities like the street basketball games, like the art exhibits that OG is involved in, so that we can create community, so that we can have healthy, positive, clean environments, not an apartheid where there are only predominantly black men in the streets, where crime is proliferating and the police, are attacking and removing the homeless people. We want community, and we want to have a chance to represent ourselves so that we can have a better voice represented at the city council meetings, because D-Lang does not address the issues that are most pertinent: community, family, and cleanliness, maintenance of our autonomy as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that we can improve downtown as a whole. We want to be viable and recognized as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Any questions? Okay. Let me, Gracie, why don't you come up? Let me give some direction and hope that we can move this forward. I have a general sense that the motion that was prepared by Mr. Reiser should be approved, but I think in approving it, there's certain caveats that I would like to see. I'd like to see a report that comes to council for approval, but in that report, I think we have to educate those who read it what the exemptions are, give an idea of the type of exemptions that can be used to be a community under 20,000. I think also we need to have the issues that deal with the list of opposition, a summary, and a summary of those who are in support and why. And then I think we need also to have some structure that allows people to make these recommendations during a certain time of the fiscal year, so they're not being handled all through the year, particularly if they have budgetary impacts, so that maybe, just like the fiscal year starts July 1st, people make an application in July and the department addresses them during the first quarter to get well before the budget process starts if their budget impacts be considered. That also, we do need to ask the CLA and the CAO for an analysis. I think the chart you've provided in your report gives what could happen. The next thing is how do they operationalize that as relates to the impact on the budget. And I think we also have to find a way to institutionalize the needs of the department so that if it's a ratio of 1 to 10, that should be something that as they're approved should not have to come back each time and say I need 2 people, but there should be a stated ratio that we can send forward and approve and say, as if this should occur and things are going to increase, then there should be a certain number of people assigned to ensure the work gets done. Because I think it's nothing more frustrating that I've seen in neighborhood councils of people expecting work to be done and we don't get it done. And I think also we're going to have to address, and I don't know quite how, but we're going to have to address in the sense of if all of a sudden we have 95 to 200 neighborhood councils, how does that get funded? I don't think we can guarantee that there will not be funding merged or suppressed from existing neighborhood councils. I don't think we could have an unlimited budget or one that says we can go from 2 or 3 million up to 10 million and not say there's some constraints on it. So I think we need to have that discussion with the CAO and some guidance as to how this might progress. And I think giving people guidelines of how they can apply, what the limitations are, and it may even be prospects of saying you can only handle so many a year. But there's got to be some structure in advance so people know what they're working with, but the timeline of when they come in. It's not going to be dealt with year-round because at certain points the budget does not absorb it. And so those are things I'd like to see in a report back that we can send to the council to approve the motion, but with certain caveats that make it operationally feasible.
Can I add one more thing? I think it's also important to anticipate the number of neighborhood councils that may be looking into subdividing and include the fiscal and management impacts that that's going to have.
Yes.
I think for this year, if you anticipate 2, it'd be great to get, the fiscal and management impact of that. If you anticipate 4 others the following year, that's important.
We covered it. Thanks.
Okay. And then if we can have that report back to the committee, what kind of timeline do you think you need? I know it's extensive, but...
We will try for 30 days to...
30 days?
Yeah.
All right. Let's put it on.
I don't know about the CAO, CLA part, though, in terms of their
Let's do
analysis.
this. Let's ask for it in 30 days. We come back and tell us where we are in it. If we have a report, we can process it. If not, we at least have an update in 30 days.
Okay.
But we do need the CLA, CAO input as to analysis of budget impact and how we can structure dealing with this and whether there's recommendations that there's 2 a year or 3 a year or whatever, that we can come up with a plan that says to the general neighborhood council bodies that we're going to address 2 to 3 of these subdivisions a year or 4 or whatever comes up.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So
Thank you.
We'll move that to 30 days and ask for that report back from Gracie on that issue. Do we need anything else on that? Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, just for the record, we're continuing the item for 30 days. We're continuing the item for 30
For
days.
30 days for that level of input that we've asked. Okay. Next item.
Item number 2 is the city attorney report relative to a draft ordinance adding to the Los Angeles Administrative Code the establishment of neighborhood council grievance panels and authority for the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners to vacate board seats.
Okay, do we have cards on this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Gracie and our city attorney, you going to comment on the ordinance?
Yes, good afternoon. Deputy City Attorney Darren Martinez. I'll basically just give a
very brief general overview of the current system and what this ordinance does, and then I'll obviously just have any questions that you have. Under the current system, there is a dual process for filing grievances and complaints. So one of the desires was to put into one system this entire process. So now we're just going to have a grievance process. There were some recommendations that were clearly desired by the community in developing this process, and this ordinance keeps those ideas in place. One was that the neighborhood councils would still have an opportunity to resolve an issue first that's brought to their attention, and then there would be an appeal or just go directly to a regional grievance panel. The regional grievance panels are going to be created with appointees from the neighborhood councils. So all the neighborhood councils will appoint a member, and they'll sit on the regional grievance panel. Their own appointees will not sit on a grievance originating from a neighborhood council, but it'll be other panel members that hear and decide this panel. There are a lot of specific details that aren't yet included in this ordinance because its purpose is to create the structure or skeleton, and there's some discretion with the department to establish some procedures as we go along and adjust the system in any necessary manner that we need to do. Some of the questions or concerns that I'm aware of are that the panel is given the authority to remove individual board members. The grievance system itself is not going to allow any types of determinations against specific individuals. So, for example, you can't file a complaint against a specific person. It also does not handle allegations of violations of state or federal law. Those are handled under the appropriate systems under state or federal law. But there may be a circumstance that arises where that complaint or grievance against a neighborhood council, the reason that the neighborhood council is not able to satisfy these objectives or the goals is because it can be attributed to an individual. So that's why this power to remove an individual still remains one of the options that exists. And remember, these are going to be then recommendations that the regional grievance panel makes to done with respect to a complaint and then implement that complaint. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Gracie, you have anything to add on the ordinance?
Gracie Lee, General Manager, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. I would only add that the exemption position issue that we're having right now currently is with this project coordinator position that would handle grievances and putting together the panels and doing all the administration of it. So until we are able to hire that position, which we were given in the budget this year, we will not be able to implement this ordinance even if it were to pass.
Okay. Let me just wait.
Why haven't you been able to fill the position?
And
why do you believe that it needs to be an exempt position?
So, as I mentioned before, we've had issues in terms of filling civil service positions because we do tend to work evenings and weekends, and so a management assistant typically wouldn't necessarily be attracted to coming to the department to work in such positions. Even in accounting, it was months before we could fill an accountant position because we just couldn't attract the candidates. So that's why we generally have been asking for exempt positions, and we haven't been able to fill it because there is a citywide limit on exempt positions, and even though it has been raised 50 recently to the total 200. The mayor's office is still determining how to allocate those positions given all the departments who have requested exempt positions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. I've expressed this before, just the frustration of volunteers in their neighborhoods who serve on a neighborhood council. And there's a certain percentage of grievances that are just based on personal feelings, people taking things personally. And is there a definition of what actually constitutes a grievance? And could there be coaching, education, a checklist that could capture intent before an actual grievance is filed so that there's sort of a check in place to keep the frivolous grievances from being filed, because they can be so damaging in a neighborhood. Nothing is more personal than one neighbor filing a complaint against another, or filing a complaint against something that a neighbor has done. And it gets personal real fast, and it actually discourages volunteerism in neighborhoods, and I've seen the damaging effects that would probably all have over the years. So is there a component to address that within this proposed ordinance?
Yes, yes, council member, that's a very good point, and we acknowledge that actually is an issue, and in the current ordinance that it does lay out what a grievance is, and it's typically they can file it only for any, and city attorney may want to help me with this one, but anything that's clearly not personal, but more of some structural issue or violation of the bylaws, where we start actually getting some crossovers when, now that we have a code of conduct that's going in, and that policy that might actually start some other grievances. So we are very aware of this matter of things becoming too personal very quickly.
And yes, the ordinance does specifically limit the types of grievances that can be filed. It basically has to be a violation of an applicable rule against the board as a body. There's also provisions in the grievance that prevent serial grievances from being filed, or grievances that are kind of repetitive. It's if it's already been addressed and the matter's been addressed, so there will be a bar. What this does importantly, and again I want to echo the department's concerns with respect to staffing, is there are a large number of grievances that are filed within the system. So it is going to take that administrative support to be able to cull through these grievances to be able to determine whether it is a valid one that can move forward in the first instance, because the department will be the first to review or determine whether the grievance itself is valid. They're not necessarily going to assess the value of the speech in terms of whether it's true or false. Somebody could make a false accusation. I saw X happen and it violates this provision of the bylaws, and that would then still move through the system, but it would get called out through the grievance process. But clearly, if it doesn't meet the threshold at the inception of the process, then the department will dismiss those grievances, and that would end the matter.
Yeah, I would urge an expedient process, because I've seen so many neighborhood councils plagued with people who show up just to jam up the process because they don't like who's serving on the neighborhood council, for example. That does happen. And I would love for some component of this adopted ordinance to address that so that it's expedient and everyone moves on more quickly, and you de-emphasize the rancor.
Yes, and there are specific timelines within which everything must occur. So, for example, the grievance must be brought to the attention immediately within 30 days. And then there's a 60-day window for the neighborhood council to decide what to do. And then if the neighborhood council is able to resolve it, it obviously would end. If not, then that's when the appeal process would kick in to the regional grievance panel, and that would be another 21 days for resolution. So in all, you could have maybe a, whatever, 5-month resolution of an issue. And that's relatively speedy. Obviously extending it brings it out. But you're correct to note that there is a desire for finality and resolution and resolving these items as quickly as possible so that it doesn't linger and continue.
Thank you. And lastly, at what point, when it does become personal and basically beyond something that you can actually assist with because it's so personal, at what point do you refer to the dispute resolution?
Well, it depends on the situation. We typically work with the Office of City Attorney just to determine that. If it's something that we know right away that there's just nothing that we can do, we will refer over. But we do try to get in there and talk to both parties and try to have some type of amicable discussion. But it could really depend on the situation.
Thank you.
One thing I was going to ask, the only timeline I have a concern about is the 30 days on the initial, because we're not asking people to do a full-fledged investigation. They're just basically saying, in essence, I have a grievance. The other parts of the process seem to be relegated as to a timeline that dictates whether meetings are held, and you could have agendas and things of that nature. And again, although we say 5 months is relatively quick, only if you're not involved in a dispute. And so I think that's one that I would like to see if we can tell people this, you should be making a grievance immediately upon, in close proximity of the action. If it takes you 30 days to get your act together, then maybe it is not as significant as you first thought. So I would just like to see that tightened up, because the other part of it in the system, once it's submitted, appears to be pretty well defined as to you can't move much more quickly. The other thing I was going to ask the city attorney is that it appears that when you're dealing with something dynamic like this, to put it in everything in the ordinance seems to be restrictive, that it doesn't give you an opportunity to make subtle changes that the process dictates without having to go to an ordinance, a change in ordinance. And it would appear that the frustration could be even greater if you can't make subtle changes. So I'm wondering if whether giving the department the authority to have a grievance process, but leaving some of the mechanics within the department's purview to adjust and make changes, whether that's a better process than saying everything's in the ordinance. And
Well, everything is not in the ordinance. So there are a number of items that are left out. It just basically creates kind of that overall structure. The panels, the idea of the timeframes, when appeals must be made. So it gives that type of, the actual formal filing of the document, what that must consist of. But there is a provision in the ordinance that allows the department then to supplement the ordinance with additional regulations. One of the key components in this is because one of the ideas that was developed through the commission level was an idea of tying a crime to fit the punishment to fit the crime. So this ordinance doesn't do that. It doesn't say if you commit this violation, this is what that crime is going to be. Ultimately, we'd like to see something that kind of gives a better idea of the ideas of the possible penalties that are imposed, and this is one of the concepts that the department is going to work to develop.
Musical interlude.
Okay.
Darrell, can you explain again the power of removing an individual from a neighborhood council? You touched upon it when you were
Yes, because there were some concerns that I've heard expressed that this ordinance includes as one of the possible remedies or sanctions the ability to remove or suspend an individual board member, and some people had expressed some reservation with that. But this was one of the recommendations that came out of the regional grievance panel. So people just seem a little fearful right now, like, oh wow, somebody might be removed. But as I mentioned, this idea is going to be developed in conjunction with the department and these panels to tie the appropriate remedies with the penalty. So while listing it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, every time a grievance is going to be filed, an individual might be removed. But the reasons that the board may not be able to comply with one of its duties as a board might not be attributed in full to the board. So there might be a reason that it's the individual that really needs to be removed.
We still have a mechanism to do that.
Yes, it's...
I understand. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. I was going to ask you one other question. I have a senior moment right now. Let's, on the issue of this ordinance, if we move forward on it, to send it to council for approval. But I also would like to add that we also support that the department gets that project coordinator position, that we believe that's essential to make this process work. So we add that as one of our recommendations.
Yeah, and I actually would like to request that that the department report back on the exempt position, requested in this year's budget, and if you anticipate requesting additional exempt positions in next year's budget as well.
But I think on our committee report, we'll support the funding.
Okay.
So that
Thank
we
you.
Go forward, and you've got a report back coming, but that we'll move forward on the grievance procedures. Hold on, I jumped too quickly because I saw people getting nervous. All right. I just wanted to give you a heads up where we're going. Mr. Schaeffer, come on up to the table. Mr. Kuzman, Patricia Bell Hurst, Bruce Kuiper.
Mr. Chair, could I impose on you perhaps to put me at the bottom because I'm going to be speaking as part of the commission?
You what now?
Perhaps putting me last because I may be speaking as what the commission has done.
Do you want to give up your seat at this time?
Don't want to give it up, just want to get to the bottom
You mean of the whole list?
of the list of speakers on this item, yeah.
Oh, you're going to have to get that up for a minute.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Spiegel.
Hi, my name's William Kuzman. The grievance document is not favorable to the needs and rights of stakeholders because of unfair limitations, and the restriction of free speech would not be in compliance with the plan for neighborhood councils, which mandates that the neighborhood councils have a grievance procedure for the benefit of the stakeholders. The serial grievance clause should be struck. It's discriminatory. It's a violation of First Amendment rights. To quote, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech of the press. And this is the good one. I didn't know this was here. Or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So any restriction of serial grievances is unconstitutional. This is not in line with the neighborhood council plan. The evidence, we're limited as to our evidence. The time period for filings too short. The use of the word may creates confusion. Standing committees or legislative bodies, bylaws say that they are supposed to follow the Brown Act. A grievance committee does not make a court determination, they only make a recommendation. So Brown Act and bylaws should be included. And I have written comments that I will pass on and leave at the back. Thank you.
I'm just worn out listening.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Let me. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're going to kind of do it this way. I can keep
I'm
track
sorry.
of the
That's
speakers.
all right.
Okay. 'Cause
That's
we're gonna
okay.
bring two other people up.
Hi, Ivan Spiegel. I'm a parliamentarian. I work around the system in various neighborhood councils. I've been following this now for about 6 years when we first came up with the idea that we needed this. It went to a thing called the Bylaws Task Force. It's been debunked several times. I was part of the plan review group that you spoke about earlier. We were unanimously in favor of this thing. We really need this, and I'll tell you what the system is right now, and it will explain why we need it. You file a grievance, it goes to your board. What does the board do with it? They appoint a grievance panel, in many cases of their own members, to hear this grievance. Whatever the resolution is, it has to come back to the board, because only the board can act on it. So the board is now acting on a grievance against itself. What do you think happens?
Nothing.
That's why we need it to be taken out of the hands of the individual councils and put into a regional body that will be much more impartial and give the stakeholders some redress. Thank you.
Next two speakers up, Linda Grant and Jay Handel. Ms. Hurst?
Good afternoon. I'm very supportive of this grievance issue. About 6 years ago, I called the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to ask them, do you have a form so that just to start the preliminary process? Well, we do, but it's not that good. And for 6 years, probably for more than that, a simple preliminary form that you would just fill out, outline what the issue is. Maybe it could be solved by a phone call from the head of the department or whatever. But this goes on where a particular neighborhood council lost such outstanding people in their community because of the verbal abuse of people that were in the leadership role of a particular neighborhood council. I sat there and watched these incredible human beings walk away after years of service because they were tired of verbal abuse, verbal attacks on their credibility. It was obscene. It can be fixed. And if the department can't fix it, put together a volunteer group. Because let me tell you, I've been in community stuff for 50 years, and we can do it in about 2 weeks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Kuiper. I'm a stakeholder in the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council area. I'm not on the council. I had a grievance recently with the council. I found that I agree with an earlier speaker using the term dysfunctional when applied to Dunn. The plan requires Dunn to provide a form. This is Article 6, Section 4, page 15 of the plan. It says that complaints against the neighborhood council shall be filed with Dunn on a form prescribed by Dunn. It took me 2 months to be told there's no form, here's the email address. Then took another couple months for the NEA, and Ms. Liu was copied on these. So was a person underneath Mr. Martinez in his office. Nobody responded. It was very frustrating. So we need attention to grievances. There was a gross violation, in my view, of the bylaws, and it finally did get resolved because finally the NEA got involved and got the neighborhood council to address my grievance. That was the problem in the first place. The president, when I submitted it to him, told me that further emails from me would be filed in the appropriate place. So I support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did Mr. Schaeffer come up from one of those seats? Okay, Ms. Gray.
Yes, just for identification purposes, I am on the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. If I wanted to bring up 2 points, because I think that they're specific enough that you should consider them. One of those is we didn't realize till I had met with Ms. Martinez's office that some of the council members may not realize that the department's never had the ability to remove a board member. So if a board member stole money from a neighborhood council but was not prosecuted because it did not reach that limit where they would be prosecuted, that person could still remain on the board. And so I think it's really important you consider that. I understand the arguments against it, but there are some cases, such as what Ms. Martinez dealt with, that we had to go into doing the code of conduct for, that there are times when somebody or other people, that there are times when somebody should be removed from a board. And the neighbor councils feel that if you take away their power to vote them out, that's an issue. But the problem is you would have to expose all that to the community for the community to be informed enough to vote them out. So the other thing I want to say is about decertification. I support the ability to be able to vacate a board seat. Look at Zapata King. It took him 7 years to be able to rebuild a council again. This way would be able to vacate a board and put in a new board without having a community being represented. Thank you.
Jay Handel. 2 things on this policy. First, it's great to have the policy, and we certainly welcome the fact that you're asking for a staff member. Having said that, the first issue I look at with this policy is an ongoing issue, and that's where the city attorney actually reviews a grievance in advance and advises the chair or the neighborhood council not to hear it because it's not a grievance. And then we have bylaws that say you must hear a grievance when it comes in, and we have NEAs going out and telling people, I don't care what the city attorney said, you have to hear it because it's in the bylaws. You must hear it. So there has to be better clarity in this process to eliminate that problem. That's an ongoing problem right now in one of the issues on the east side. The other issue, quite frankly, is, I understand the serial griever issue. I deal with it every day as I go around town as the chair of the mentoring program. But the biggest part of the problem is we don't have staff out there to guide these councils, and that's what's causing all these grievances. So when we limit someone to 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever the grievances are, we're basically taking away our neighborhood watch from the neighborhood councils so that they can tell us what's going on. So I think there has to be a better balance. I don't think unlimited is good, but 3 might not be the right answer. Thank you.
Mr. Schaeffer.
Leonard Schaeffer, Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. I started with this process back in 2006 with the NCRC, and it's gone forward since then. In 2011, the Commission passed a resolution supporting a grievance process that may be amongst the package, the 95 pages of the package for this particular agenda. Our working groups that were established in 2012 had multiple meetings, multiple hearings, and such as that. And this ordinance basically follows what was recommended by the neighborhood councils. It combines 2 aspects. One is the grievance process itself. The second is the ability of the commission to remove board members or a board rather than decertifying and causing basically punishing an entire neighborhood. If I may, please. This is the start of a process. We now have a code of conduct that can be part of this whole process. I hope that the commission will move forward to give neighborhood councils the tools that they need to deal with certain things within their neighborhood councils, certain things that happen at their board meetings and such, and only when they do not function on their own, and only when they do not handle them on their own in a correct manner, will you see these moving to grievance panels and further on. We want to give them the power to start. This ordinance gives them that power. It follows the plan. We will help them. We will give them processes to work with. If they don't have process, we will encourage them. Of course, we do need to see a staff member at the department. That is essential because it starts the screening, and only once it has been validated there at the department does the rest of the process actually begin, and it goes back to the neighborhood council. I would ask you to really move this forward. Thank you.
Let me ask City Attorney one question. Somebody brought up the issue of bylaws versus the ordinance. The ordinance supersedes bylaws.
Correct.
So we need to make sure people are aware that the bylaws are superseded by the ordinance. So if there's some conflict, that the ordinance is the one that basically is used as the authority. So if we move item number 2 forward, pardon? I don't have a card for you. I've exhausted all the cards. Come up and sit. Why don't you sit down and make your comments, and you can fill one out after.
I assume that everyone believes that there should be some method of resolving grievances within the neighborhood councils, but it's the environment. These councils always form cliques and groups and things like that. People take sides. So there has to be an independent, impartial third party to resolve these grievances. Now, taking someone's elected position away is a pretty serious thing. Impeach, recall, vote of confidence, I don't know what you might call it. But most instances, most of us don't believe these councils really do anything that serious. But right now, our council is, and that's why we want to see to it there's some method of resolving our grievances. Either by impeachment, recall, vote of confidence, we have no idea. But somehow, the stonewalling and the objections we're getting from the leadership has to be overwhelmed and suppressed. Thank you.
Excuse me, council members, just one clarification.
Fill out a card before you leave.
In addition to the ordinance is also a recommendation for a plan amendment. So I just want to make that clear because we have to make these changes in both documents. So we have the ordinance change and we have the change to the plan for a citywide system of neighborhood councils.
Okay, very good. All right, Mr. Hayes, if you give us a card now, then we could have it on the file. So on this item, if we move it forward on the ordinance, supporting the approval of the ordinance, also the approval of the plan amendment that works hand in hand with this, that we also as a committee support that the exempt authority of the project coordinator, we support that it should be approved and funded. And also I'd like to make sure in the notes that we clarify that the ordinance would supersede any bylaws of any individual neighborhood council. We'll move that forward with those.
No objections.
Next item.
Item number 3 is the Dunn Report relative to the creation of funding accounts for the LA Congress of Neighborhoods and for the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocacy.
Gracie Lee, General Manager for the Department of Neighbor Empowerment. In 2013, City Council created a budget advocacy / Congress account. This allowed neighbor councils to support the Congress of Neighborhoods each year, as well as the work of the Neighbor Council Budget Advocates. There were restrictions on this account, one of them, the major restriction being $100,000. At the time that it was created, we had anticipated this was a per fiscal year restriction. However, it turns out it is a cap for the lifetime. So at this point, the account is maxed in terms of hitting that $100,000 cap, and we are therefore requesting for 2 accounts to be made to separate the Congress of Neighborhoods and the Budget Advocate accounts, and to have those capped at $100,000 each. And we will be doing this each fiscal year pursuant to the controller instructions in terms of making sure that we can track the money accurately and feel that this allows the neighborhood councils to continue to support these very two important works that they do each year. And I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Let me just ask for clarity. What I didn't understand, what was the rationale for the cap in the first place?
I believe the cap was put in the first place as perhaps a budgetary stopgap in case neighbor councils who weren't able to spend their funds just dumped funds into this account instead. And I believe
they can't retrieve it, right?
Say that again?
If they gave the money for these specific purposes, they couldn't later come back and retrieve it.
That's right. They couldn't do that. But I think that there was a concern that might happen. So.
And the whole is it the only source of both of these accounts is funding that the neighborhood councils contribute for these two activities?
That's correct.
Again, it was unclear then even more so why we'd put a cap if they're donating for Dunn to be able to perform and assist them to perform certain tasks. Why would we cap it? Because it rolls over, right? This is not
right.
Swept.
This is never swept. Okay. Right. It's a special account, so it's never swept. And so I believe at the time that there was a request to put a cap on it for that reason.
Okay. So now you're saying if we make it into two separate accounts and cap each one at $100,000, what does that aid us to do?
So it allows us to separate the accounts to track them more accurately at this point because of that initial cap and the fact that they shared the accounts. The budget advocates ended up not getting as much funding because of that cap. So Congress did receive more funding, so we felt that in the end it would be cleaner to track it and allow both of them to raise the necessary funds as they saw fit. And so every year, controllers asked us to ask for a creation of these accounts so that each account would only track for one fiscal year.
But if it's the one account when a neighbor council contributes, is it earmarked specifically for the budget advocates, or does it just go into the fund?
They specifically state to us we have voted to contribute this amount to Congress or to the budget advocacy.
So then, if it goes as we've had it in the past, then would there still be that disparity in the amount of money that goes to each one because of the designation?
Right. So it wouldn't be disparity because now they would have their own separate accounts with their own separate caps.
I know, but if the neighborhood councils don't contribute to them as freely as they do the Congress, that's not necessarily going to change just because they have a separate
That's
account.
correct. But in the last round of fundraising for them, that was an issue because of the limit of the existing account.
Okay. Let me ask you just maybe a typo, but it shows in 2013-14 the contribution exceeded $33,858, and then it shows later that after the receipts and the funding was of $31,400. What was the difference in those two amounts?
I'm sorry. Oh, are you reading on that first paragraph?
The second paragraph where it talks about the contributions exceeded the...
Some neighborhood councils actually contributed and didn't have money to contribute.
Okay. So they...
When after everything was said and done, yes. They had run out of funds.
They were floating a check.
Yes.
All right.
Well, you just answered that question. So was the excess amount spent towards other expenses of the activities?
So anything that was above the amount, the $100,000 cap was returned back to the neighborhood council.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
So that's what you do every time you exceed funds that you've received, you just return it back to...
Right. This is the first time that this has happened because we didn't realize at that we thought that every fiscal year, as soon as they spent it down, there would be more room to add more funds, but it turned out to be a $100,000 lifetime cap.
What were the costs of the LA Congress of Neighborhoods and Budget Day last year?
So last fiscal year for Congress, you'll see on that second line, it's $28,255.22. And the budget advocates was $8,763.14. And that goes towards the location, materials, food. It's a pretty massive event for them to set up. And so they are now, because of the success, they regularly get over 700 people attend the Congress. They are looking at making it into possibly multi-days, expanding it into City Hall East, which it's currently only at City Hall. So, they do want the ability to raise more funds to cover that expense.
So how much more are you expecting the events to increase by each year?
I don't have an exact figure for that because it depends on what the Congress Planning Committee decides to do. If it goes into multi-days, it could easily double the current expenditures. And with budget advocates, they're working with the mayor's office and looking to do outreach for the budget process. And I know $100,000 sounds like a lot, but when you look at it in light of citywide outreach for the budget process, it's not really that much at all. And I know that they are, starting to do more innovative things in terms of having a radio show to talk about the city budgets, and I know that they're starting this in the next few months. So there is definitely the ability to increase their costs as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, this is to grow your outreach capacity, both in terms of the budget and in terms of Congress of Neighborhoods, just so you can do more outreach citywide, and this grows your capability. My question is, what's the existing process for contributions? Does a neighborhood council just take it upon themselves to donate $1,000 or $2,000? So, for example, if there are 96 neighborhood councils and they all decided to donate $2,000, that would get you pretty close to the $200,000, in each pot. And it would get us there. That's a voluntary action, clearly, by the neighborhood councils. Do the same neighborhood councils tend to donate to the fund, to the existing fund?
Yes, the same neighborhood councils tend to donate. And I apologize, I don't have a list of that. I should have brought that.
Okay.
But they do. It is a voluntary act. The department receives funding in the amount of $10,000 for Congress and $10,000 for budget advocates to assist in their activities as well. So this is in addition to that. And the neighborhood councils just take a board vote. The Congress and the budget advocates actually go to the neighborhood councils and tell them about what they're doing and how it's helpful for them and how they can support in growing the system. And at that point, they make a determination whether or not they want to support.
And these funds, can they also take donations from individuals or businesses or other stakeholders who just want to help?
Currently, the donation any outside donation can only be accepted through City Council, and I don't know in terms of this fund whether or not we could take funding outside. It's currently written to only take funding from the neighborhood councils themselves, but I don't see why we couldn't.
And I'm not suggesting. I'm just out of curiosity. I just wasn't sure. It would be okay. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
From your assessment, is that if we go to two accounts that $100,000 each, that's going to cover what's viewed as the expenses?
I believe so.
So that we're not coming back in 3 months and say it should be 120 or...
Well, I think because I have to come back every year to ask for two new accounts to be opened, that next year, if it turns out that we have to lift the 100,000 cap, then at that point I will ask.
So you have to do a new ordinance each year?
Right, a new request each year is what the Office of the Controller requested.
That seems, why would they do that?
I don't know. I believe it, when we asked them what was the most accurate way to track this information, they gave us this method.
The other thing I was wondering about is that when we talk about the two categories, the budget advocates and also the Congress, does any of those funds assist in upcoming elections, or is that one of the goals also? When we say outreach?
No, the outreach is only typically for budget advocates in terms of citywide outreach. The outreach for Congress would be to the neighborhood councils themselves. They could start, if they went to multi-day, they could advertise to open it up to any community organization who is interested in learning the tools and techniques that they provide of how to effectively advocate on the day of the Congress. So it's not necessarily election related. Outside of in Congress, they will typically have a class on effective outreach techniques, particularly during election years.
The other thing, I want to go back to that issue of if the funds roll over, then I can't understand why they would start new accounts each year if they roll over each year. That seems inconsistent.
Controller stated that they would like to, currently the way we're tracking it right now within the existing account, we separate it by fiscal years, like what you see in front of you.
Right. That you have a better accounting, but if it's going to roll over automatically, then it seems inconsistent to say the account zeroes out or we create a new one just in order to roll the money into the newer account?
No, the old money would stay in that existing account, and then any new monies raised would go into the new account. We wouldn't transfer the funds back and forth.
But you then, in essence, could have 3 or 4 of these at any given time?
That is correct. And so they would, as they spend down, they would spend down the older accounts.
Okay, that seems to be a burden on a department that doesn't have a lot of resources to keep track of 3 or 4 of these accounts, as opposed to rolling them over and keeping a running tally.
Yeah, I believe the controller did not want to do that because of the possibility of mixing different fiscal year funds.
Okay, we have some cards. Mr. Schaeffer, Mr. Spiegel, Ms. Linda Grant, and Jay Handel.
Good afternoon again. Leonard Schaeffer, Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. At our last meeting, the letter that the department had to present to this committee with regards to this matter was presented to us, and we did support it. On a personal note, I think that this is a very worthwhile because I have now found that as I go to different meetings, especially the Congress and the budget advocates, that I am meeting new and young people who are getting notified of these events because these two groups have the ability to spend money and advertise for neighborhood councils. So both on a commission basis and on a personal basis, I would support this.
Hi, Ivan Spiegel. I am currently the co-chair of the workshop committee for the Congress. We plan the program. But before I start, Councilman, you just gave me my new mantra for dealing with the city. Why would they do that? Thank you. That works for everything. The Congress has been immensely successful. We currently we're getting over 700 people out of 1,800 neighborhood council board members attend, so that's more than a third of the population. I think that's fabulous. We're doing workshops on all different kinds of things, and yes, elections will be on the program this year because it's coming up. Councils have been very generous in giving us money in order to operate, and most councils don't give $2,000. Most give between $250 and $500. $250 basically pays for their breakfast and lunch, which we give them. But we need the capacity to be able to keep growing. We'd like to make this into an even better event. Thank you.
Lydia Grant, Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. I'm also the liaison between the Board of Commissioners and the Congress Planning Committee. I am on the Congress Planning Committee and have been for 3 years. One of the things that this does is it actually gives us the ability to be proactive for a change. We are now looking at the amount of people that we have growing every year and the fact that we do not exclude stakeholders and we allow stakeholders also, that we could be expanding over the next couple of years and even doubling our ability to train and outreach to neighborhood councils and stakeholders throughout the city. With that comes this year's plans of already talking about having to expand to the South Lawn, having to expand possibly shut down Spring Street, because we need the ability to be able to reach out and train more people at a time. So I just want to give you that, so you're thinking, so you're knowing that this is more of is very proactive in trying to expand that outreach, and we need the ability to do that. We may have to expand to multiple days in the future. We may have to find another location also. So just letting you know that I support doing this. Thank you.
Jay Handel, speaking as the co-chair of the Budget Advocates. So for 3 years, I've co-chaired the Budget Advocates, and for a time, what we've heard is, a lot of the stakeholders don't know what we do, and neighborhood councils don't hear from us. So by having availability to funds finally, this year we will hold 6 regional budget days sometime in March, that we will actually have what's happening in the City Hall area sent out to all of the areas. So we'll all be everybody will be interactive and involved. We'll have audience responses so that we'll be able to get responses to the budget issues right there and then for immediate looking at. We will begin our first of 2 radio shows on March 1st on KRLA, and they are Neighborhood Council budget shows, and they will be done on Saturday nights. Hopefully that'll be something moving forward in the future. And our budget days have been very, very successful. We pay. We pay for security in our buildings. We pay to have the room opened up. We pay for IT. We pay for Channel 35. These are all the expenses that we have to incur within our city family in order for us to get our message out to everybody around the city. So we have a great outreach committee. We have a really solid 36 people on our committee this year, and I think you'll hear some really great things coming from the Budget Advocates, in great part because we actually have the funding to do it now. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask the City Attorney, is the ordinance that's in our book today, is this the ordinance that you're looking to get approved, changed into 2 accounts?
No, this is not. This is just going to be a request.
Request of the
Yeah, correct? You're just making a request to the, there's no ordinance change here, or there's not an issue of making an ordinance change. Which are you referring to?
Transmit, we just asked Dunn to send a letter to the controller, or how do we do that? Because what I have is the ordinance on the checking accounts, and
What section are you looking at?
It's dealing with the checking accounts 182792.
In the letter support, there should be an attachment A, which provides some of the language that City Council would have to approve in order to open these 2 separate accounts.
Okay, I don't see that.
Do you have that?
What I have is attached is all the material about opening checking accounts for neighborhood councils that we did several months ago.
So that might have been, there should be one attachment A on page 4 of the letter, updated February 11th, 2015.
I don't have that.
Do you have page 4? It provides an update in its motion language, and it provides the details of the situation, and then at the end, it provides language. I therefore move that City Council authorizes the Office of the Controller to create an LA Congress of Neighborhoods account number 47L220 and a Neighborhood Council Budget Advocacy account number 47L225 in Fund number 44B, Department number 4701. I can provide this to clerk. It should have been submitted. My apologies if it wasn't.
So the letter you're talking about is merely directing them? No, I don't have that at all. All I have is the ordinance about opening credit checking accounts. No, this one's fine. And to make sure they confused me, they gave me 3 copies of the same thing. You know, none of us have this. So,
Okay. Yeah, it was submitted with, electronically with the clerk's new system.
Yeah, at the time the agenda was posted, that was, I think the same time it was submitted.
The link, yeah, we did have an issue because of the city clerk's new electronic submission system. Even though we'd submitted, they had not been able to pick it up or receive it on their side, so I don't know if that was ultimately resolved.
yeah, I think I may have solved the dilemma. On the copy the city attorney just shared with us, it's a two-sided copy which appears to be the front page. The front page has to do with the renaming of it.
I've just provided the clerk a copy if you want to provide it to Councilmember Parks. So on page 4 of that letter will be the motion language.
Okay, let me just ask, oh yeah, I got it now. You see this?
So it's,
You got it? Okay. All right. So let me ask, in order to transmit this letter, what is being asked of us?
Just to make the motion.
Just make the motion
Yes,
as stated?
Yeah, making the motion as stated on the department's recommended attachment.
All right. So the committee is going to support and approve the letter from Dunn that's dated February 11, 2015, with attachment A, which provides information on establishing the two separate accounts and the account numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I'd ask is that you, on the sidebar, talk to the controller and see if we get a better understanding of why they're making you do multiple accounts, even though they're being rolled over so that your bookkeeping is going to outstrip your personnel.
I will do that. Thank you.
All right, so we'll approve that on item 3, the letter and the attachment A. All right. Okay, next item.
Item number 4 is consideration of an application to name a Community View Heights. The application was approved for filing on August 14th, 2014, and the primary applicant is Derek Solomon.
Let me just ask, is it clear that all of the requirements as to signatures have been met?
That would be a question for the city clerk's office, as they're the ones that process the applications.
Sorry, sir.
On item 4, have all the requirements of signatures been met?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have cards?
Yes, sir, we have 3 cards.
Okay. Thank you. We'll have 3 people come up at this time. Mark Frank, Chandra Mosley, and Theodore Thomas.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Bernard Parks, and committee members. My name is Mark Franks. I'm the Communication Officer for the View Parks, View Heights Block Club. We would like our application request to rename a section of Hyde Park to View Heights placed on the City Council's calendar for approval consideration. Our request was submitted to the City Clerk's office on May 28, 2014, at which time it was validated and found to be in total compliance with all policy requirements established within the City Council policy for naming or renaming a community, adopted January 31st, 2006. As required, we established the boundaries, provided a map of the area, and obtained a petition that reflects signatures of 20% of the affected residents. The City Clerk's office disseminated a letter of notification dated August 29, 2014 to the Planning Department, Bureau of Engineering, and the Department of Transportation with the deadline of October 31st, 2014. 2 have responded with their findings and with no opposition, although the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment was given an extended deadline of December 6, 2014. Due to a delayed notification to date, we have not received a response or opposition from our neighborhood council.
I just need to clarify one thing. When you use the term renaming, does that accurately depict what you're asking us to do? Or is the name historical and you're formalizing an historical name?
I'm going to have Chandra answer that.
We're actually asking Councilman Parks to rename, because the name is currently Hyde Parks officially.
Okay.
And so historically, we've been referenced as View Heights for decades, and it's been in newspaper. So we're trying to rename it to View Heights and make that official.
Okay, but you're confusing me now. Because what I understood is that it was historically View Heights, but not formally.
It's been historically referred to as View Heights,
View
yes.
Heights, but not formally in city documents and things like that.
Absolutely.
But I'm also aware that in creating the Park Mesa Heights Neighborhood Council, the Heights is referring to your neighborhood.
No.
What Heights is that?
Park Mesa is referring to Park Mesa Neighborhood Council.
Did you hear what I said? Park Mesa Heights Neighborhood Council.
Right.
The Heights in that term, because they pulled together several neighborhoods.
Correct.
What I understood the Heights was referring to is View Heights.
No, that was not our understanding.
What Heights is it referring to?
Well, Ted Thomas would have to.
It's Councilman, it's View Heights. What they did when the neighborhood council was formed, they formed 3 committees: Hyde Park, Angeles Mesa, and View Heights.
That's right.
And View Heights, where we live at, was considered View Heights, but we've never been able to have the signs and things that we needed from 63rd. Yeah, it's View Heights.
That's what I'm saying. You're not renaming, you're elevating it to a formal status. That's what I want to get clarified. Because there's a different process if you're renaming.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah. The process of the
It's always
petition.
historically been called View Heights, but formally it's never been given that designation. The community has called it View Heights.
Correct.
So all you're doing is renaming your current neighborhood council, you're not forming a new one?
No, not neighborhood council. The area of their
Area,
community.
okay.
Yeah, the area, they historically, and it's a divider, Crenshaw Boulevard has been, View Heights has been on the west side of Crenshaw. Hyde Park has been on the east side. And when they came together as neighborhood council, they created one neighborhood council with 3 communities: View Heights, Angeles Mesa, and Hyde Park. View Heights realizes that they have never formally been identified as a community, although they've called themselves View Heights for decades. So they want to elevate the name of their community in a formal sense.
Okay.
So they're renaming their community?
Yeah. Well, they named it. They're formalizing what's been the name. Do I understand it?
Yes. What it is, we want to really do the whole area, because from where I'm listening, it's from 63rd to Slauson to West Boulevard to the, to the county line. When you're going up 59th Place and you cross Buckler, when you go halfway up that street, it's still View Heights. Then the county kick in before it get to over here. So we just want to we don't have anything against it, but we just want all the residents in View Heights be a part of it. And we want the signs to express that.
Is there a conflict?
That's the conflict, Councilman Parks. What Ted Thomas is speaking of is he wants the name View Heights to go as far east as Crenshaw.
No.
That does not fall in line with as far as our conversation previously, that does not fall in line with the description of View Heights historically. View Heights historically refers to the healing scenic neighborhoods with bungalow, Spanish-style homes. And what Ted Thomas, as the president of the Park Mesa Neighborhood Council, his conversation with me is that they want to move it far as east as Crenshaw and then go north of Slauson. And that has been our opposition, our position with him since we started this process.
Well, I never did say, you misunderstood me. It was from West Boulevard because Hyde Park is there. And I didn't want to get into discussion with this because you guys didn't spread it far enough. You didn't go to 63rd Street. 63rd Street is part of that area from 63rd all the way down to West Boulevard. You have 58th Place, you have 59th Street, you have 59th Place, and you didn't do the process right. And then you have 60th Street, you guys can go to 60th Street, you guys can go to 61st Street, you go to 62nd Street. All of that is part View Heights. And when it was written up with the neighborhood council, that's how they written it out. It's in the bylaws and everything, the way the section was set up. I never did say go to Crenshaw, because Crenshaw would be Hyde Park and part of Angeles Mesa.
Your concern is that you don't think it covers enough area.
It don't cover the whole area where we are.
What is the area called historically that you're saying should be added to it?
View Heights.
That
We
is not-
send it in. We send it into the city clerk, the boundary, the map, and everything.
There's no records.
No, they don't have no map, but we have a map,
Councilman Parks, we've done extensive research. There is no historical record of View Heights ever. And so the area that speaks to the historical description of View Heights is west of Alviso to Buckler to the west, and it can go as far as 63rd Street. Once you pass 63rd Street, you're in Inglewood. Inglewood starts at 64, so we can't encroach on that boundary at that point. So we have no issues with going as south as 63rd Street if the neighbors want to, in that area, want to go through the process. But the way the policy that was adopted by the City Council to name and rename our community January 31st, 2006, it doesn't state, as Mr. Thomas stated, that we did it wrong. We followed the policy explicitly. We did everything that it was required of us as far as identifying the boundaries, coming up with the maps, and getting 20% of the resident and stakeholders within those boundaries in order to submit it for approval with the City Council. And that is what we're asking to do now. We are opposed to going east of Alviso for obvious reasons, one of which it does not fall in line with the historical description, as you mentioned, that has been listed for decades as View Heights.
What about the area around Butler?
Buckler is Windsor Hills, and the signs are already placed.
Okay, but part of Butler is still city, right?
The mid-street Buckler is going from east to west is county, and it's Windsor Hills. Going from east to, going from west to east of Buckler, mid-street, is quote-unquote Hyde Park, and it's city.
No, it's View Park when you cross Slauson, because that's where the county come in. And when Buckler, when you pass in the 40, when you go up over Butler, it's 4400 block, go halfway up, and that's still in the city. And it don't say Windsor Hills there. You're going to get complaints from the people from there, because that will still be part of View Heights. And if you look at the statement, I don't know when it came out, in 2003, that's what they considered it when the first neighborhood councils came out and was written in the bylaws. That's why we was able to say that part was View Heights.
Okay, so you're saying the neighborhood council original bylaws?
Yes.
The greater boundary than what they are proposing?
Yes.
And where did those boundaries come from?
When the neighborhood councils came into existence.
What maps or what were you using?
Well, I have a map here. We sent it into the city clerk.
Now, and are you obviously you're using two different sets of maps?
No, they're the same maps. It's just that the premise that Mr. Thomas is proposing is that we include their map that covers a large area. It even covers all the way to, I believe, is Arlington, as far as the Hyde Park area. We're just asking for the section that is descriptive under the historical reference of View Heights to be officially named View Heights. And based on the policy that City Council established, we followed that, and there should not be a issue with approving that based on the procedures and policy was required.
Did you guys use historical maps when you made the neighborhood councils, or what maps?
Yes, they use the maps, and it's printed out, even in...
Historical maps?
Yes, and we use the maps there, and that's how they divide the cities up. If you go down Crenshaw, you look at Hyde Park, you look where Angela Mesa start, even like when 77 split it up. They've split up View Heights, they split up Hyde Park, they split up Angela Mesa, start at 52nd Street, and go back east to Van Ness on the north side, on the west side of the street, and go up to 76 on the west side of the street. Then when you go down to Slauson, you go past Buckler, and then you go back south. So it's a big area. View Heights is a big area, just like Hyde Park is, from Van Ness to Crenshaw to West Boulevard. Because on this
I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I chair the audits committee, which started 2 minutes ago, so I have to leave. But you're on the audits committee with me, so you'll be with, okay?
Yeah, I'll be there.
So I apologize. Thank you very much.
The thing I'm confused with is that you're saying from your proposal that you've used the historical maps to come up with your boundary. Are there other maps that have a larger boundary? Or is that what?
There's maps with different titles, and the title that Mr. Thomas is referring to is the title that covers the entire Park Mesa area, the Park Mesa Neighborhood Council area. And I'm familiar with that map, and it covers various communities, one of which is Hyde Parks. And so, again, all we're doing is asking for the portion of Hyde Parks that's currently named Hyde Parks that falls under the description of View Heights to be officially named View Heights. That's all we're asking for.
And you're using as your basis the historical map?
No, there is no historical map. It's just the references that have been made through real estate and through LA Times newspaper articles that reference this area that is sister to View Park, Windsor Hills, and Ladera as View Heights. That's the only reference we have. There is no historical map that I'm aware of. We got responses back from the Bureau of Engineering, and they identified that it's Hyde Park. We got response back from DOT. We received no responses from planning and none from Park Mesa Neighborhood Council until now, other than the outside conversations we've had about wanting to extend it further east, which we are opposed to.
What is your opposition for the larger area?
The larger area, does not fall inconsistent with the description. That's the primary reason. As far as the homes and the style of homes, the hilly scenic streetways and that sort. The other thing is that once you pass east of Alviso, there's a change not only in the condition in which the community keep up their neighborhoods, the styles of the houses, but as well the crime rate goes up. So I think it would diminish what we're trying to do within our area and the boundaries that we prescribe if we extend it further east. It takes away from the historical description. Period.
But you know, one thing, I may have used the wrong term when I said historical maps. You're using something as a reference that identifies boundaries that you're referencing.
Right.
What is that?
Hyde Park.
No. What is the document? What is it that you're using that says historically these are the boundaries? What is the document? I think we're using the term historically differently. To me, historically, it's referencing the decades of the description of View Heights. To you and to the, I think what Mr. Thomas is referring to is some other historical document that has already been researched, including through the city clerk's office, and there's no historical map or reference to View Heights. But what I need is that there's something you're referencing that gave you boundaries.
No, we established our own boundaries out from Hyde Park. So we live currently within the boundaries of Hyde Park.
I know, but
So based on the policy, we pulled out,
policy says you have to have signatures from the larger community. I don't think the policy gives you the ability to say, here's the larger area, I'm just going to take this segment. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. When you drew the boundaries, what were you referencing when you drew the boundaries?
the boundaries that reference the description of View Heights.
Okay, what is that you're referencing?
Just the historical reference to it. There was no map or anything documented.
News articles, they're what?
Correct. The news articles, which is in your
Real
package.
estate descriptions?
Correct.
Okay, there's something that has those boundaries that are listed?
They don't state, Councilman, they don't state the specific boundaries. We did look for that, and they don't state that. That's why we included those items in your package that we submitted, because there's no designated street name that is provided for us to cut off those boundaries other than the description itself.
My final question, because I'm getting more confused, but my final question is that in dealing with this issue, with no map or other references, then what drives your objection to the larger area that was incorporated into the neighborhood council called View Heights?
As I stated, is the mere description of the area is what our objection is. Because once you go east of Alviso, the description of View Heights is no longer there.
I mean, but what is that description on? That's what I'm trying to get you to
The
tell me.
description is on the articles that we provided for you. That's basically where the description is, and as we've bought into the neighborhood, Realtors has referred this area that we live in as View Heights, which is one of LA's best known kept secrets in reference or in comparisons with other city, the rest of the Los Angeles.
Can I add a point? Just going east of Alviso is flat, and so just in the name itself, View Heights, it's just inconsistent with even that name. You know, the idea of View Heights is that there's hillsides, you kind of some views, the type of homes. If we start going too far east, it doesn't really even make sense anymore with that name and the way we've carved it out.
Okay, but if you go further east, what is it called?
Hyde Park.
I'm not sure what it's called east.
It's called Hyde Park after you cross West Boulevard. You see the signs there and everything. But see, when we talk, you know, you say that, I said to Crenshaw, and I just didn't want to get into discussion, but I have talked to some of the block clubs. For instance, Miss Mays stay on the other side of Buckler, and she just sent me an email and say that she wanted to be because she never was asked, and she's on the hilly part. And the thing that you're talking about, they showed one prescription of that, and it was on 61st Street when they said the historic on it. It was but one part, and I don't know whether you went to 61st Street or not. I'm just saying, if the whole community, you should have taken in the whole community. And like when I looked at it, when you asked me, yeah, I support it if you take on the whole community, but I don't think you can just cut out an isolated spot and just say that would be View Heights. And as far as the crime statistic goes, all of it is safe, and the crime statistics have been down because I keep up with that every day too. I don't see where the crime have picked up. Look like you're trying to separate the neighborhood. That's all I'm saying, if you want to go that far. At first, I was just saying, we have the bylaws, we have the maps and everything. We sent it into the clerk's office and everything, and wrote the boundaries down and everything where it should be. Because you're talking about Hillcrest, Chesley, and different places like that. If you look at View Park come all the way to Slauson. And it's not going to be like the real View Park, if you're going to say that way. View Park on back up there is in the hills too. But then you come down to Chesley, Hardcourt, and all that. That's his View Park too, right up to the edge of Slauson, where Buddha Market is. But I'm just saying, how can you separate, take a little section out and say this is that, this would be View Park, and where the rest of the area have already been established as View Heights. We never would have set it up. I don't guess the neighborhood council would have never set it up as View Heights if that wouldn't have been a part of it. We have a representative running for that,
Let me ask you again my final question.
Yes, please.
What are you using as a basis of the larger area?
We have the diagram. We're using, you have Chesley, you have Hillcrest.
I know, but what is the document you're using as a reference?
Our map. The map that was presented to me when that's with the
neighborhood council map.
Yeah, the neighborhood council map.
Who made that map?
The neighborhood council made it. It's drawn out. When I came in, it was in this
planning area.
Yeah, it was handed out to us when we came in. That was part of the. When I came in as president, that was part of the map that they showed us. This would go along with it, and that's how they had split the areas out.
With the neighborhood council.
Yes.
And the map you received is saying this section,
yes,
this larger section is View Heights.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any historical basis of that map?
No.
So it's not referenced a planning area. It's not referencing any other kind of designation?
Well, we have been trying to find out and ask some of the older people that's in the neighborhood, that's when they first, bought the property, what was it called, when the property was first built there. And we haven't been able to find anyone that was originated from that property, in the area. So it's just a limbo. Then you would have to change our neighborhood bylaws. What is View Park? What is View Heights?
Okay, but that's an internal neighborhood council.
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this. If the boundaries were set as to the smaller portion that's being recommended, what would the larger area be called in your neighborhood council?
It would be called No Man's Land. because you right in the center of Hyde Park, you're right in the center of Hyde Park Boulevard that go east, and then you have Hillcrest, you have Chesley, that's go to the county line, then you have from 63rd going back up. So what would you call it? Now, if the people's on 61st to 63rd is not part of View Park, View Heights, what would you call it? Would they have a section there? How far do they go? Do they go all the way? Do they stay from 58 to 59 or 60? Then what you gonna call 61st, 62nd, 63rd? That is hilly all the way too. That's all I'm saying. What are you going to call it?
Council member, let me just make this last statement. One is that the Bureau of Engineering sent a response with a map stating that the area that we identified is officially Hyde Park. If you look at most of the other communities, View Park, Ladera, even Baldwin Hills, they're all jagged boundaries. They're not consistently anything. And the whole area as a whole is referred to as quote-unquote Los Angeles. So it wouldn't make any difference what configuration we made our boundaries. Our boundaries would be what we're proposing to be approved by City Council, and the areas outside of those boundaries would remain what they are right now. So that wouldn't be an issue. If 60th through 63rd want to have the boundaries extended, no one has brought that to us, but if they want to, we have no opposition to that. We used the policy that was provided to us by Senior Field Officer Deputy Patrice Jefferson, and we followed it, and we established the boundaries that we were concerned with, and we received the petition and the signatures, and we submitted to the city clerk's office. It was verified, and we're now trying to move forward to go to council to get it approved. That is it, and that is what we're asking for now. There's no official references via map, statement, or any other format that talks about View Heights as being acknowledged and recognized by the city of Los Angeles.
And you're not opposed to the larger area if the community does a process?
There is a process. However, we don't want that to impede the process that we've already done. We want them...
Let me go back to my question.
Okay.
You're not opposed if the larger area wants to do this as long as they abide by the process?
Correct.
All right.
And not supersede the process we've already done.
We're not trying to supersede. We're trying to work out the details. What I'm going to do is that because we can't resolve this in this meeting, I'm going to ask Lorenzo and the CLA and planning to meet with you before we bring this back to committee so we can get a clear understanding of what the city, so that we're not leaving any area or didn't make it available to another part of the area. But we don't want to eliminate your process. We want to see if we can make sure that we are legally abiding by your wishes and not creating a dilemma or a liability for ignoring another part of the community that may have an equal statement as to what the name of their community is. We'll do this very quickly, so don't get excited that you're going to be years down the road. But we'll do it very quickly, and I'll ask Lorenzo, the CLA, and planning, probably Bureau of Engineering, to get in a room and bring you all together and see what we can hash out, and we'll bring it to committee as soon as they have met with you and come to a conclusion. Is that a deal?
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to hold that until we have that meeting. Next item.
Item number 5 is consideration of an application to name a community Sawtell Japantown. Application was approved for filing on December 1st, 2014. The primary applicant is Carol Nakano.
Okay. All right. Do we have a speaker cards on that? Okay. Let me have the speakers come up at this time. Let me ask, while we're doing this, are all the city requirements and the petition been satisfied as far as the requirements?
I believe so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The speakers, Mr. Handel, Jack Fujimoto, Ted Tanaka, Randy Sakamoto. Those are the first 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jay Handel. I'm acting right now as the chair of the West LA Sawtell Neighborhood Council. We not only approve with great gusto this name change to the historic area, but in keeping with the fact that it is so historic, we decided that the West LA Neighborhood Council should actually become the West LA Sawtell Neighborhood Council, and we have voted to approve that and sent that to the department for final approval and bylaw changes. So we would not only encourage you to do this, we would encourage you to do this forthwith, and hopefully we could all be around to see those signs go up in our district very, very quickly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jack Fujimoto, and I was retired from the Los Angeles Community College District 20 years ago as an educator and as administrator and president of Los Angeles Pierce College, Los Angeles Mission College, West Los Angeles College. And then when I retired, I figured that I got to do something for my community. And so community development became a very crushing or interesting, important issue for me. So this afternoon, I want to present to the council members the book that I've written on Sawtell, West Los Angeles, Japantown. And if you would be so good to accept it, it'd be my pleasure to give it to you.
Thank you.
In addition to this, we've circulated a petition and all of that, and I'm leaving my old age and my view of my community to younger people who have now taken up the issue of historic Sawtell, Japantown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two more speakers come up, Greg Erickson and Ron Cato.
Hi, my name is Randy Sakamoto. Sawtell was a small town in Los Angeles, started in the early 1900s. And in the early 1900s, Japanese started to arrive in the west side. And due to restricted covenants, they all bought within this small area. And this area started as a little area, and then it grew and grew and grew, and it's kind of roughly this size. And I gave some pictures out just to show the different types of activities that have occurred during the year. And our neighborhood is still very strong. There are a number of large Christian and Buddhist churches. There's a large Japanese language school and martial arts school. And that serves as a community center, and we'll be doing more development of that to make that even stronger. So our community is thriving, and Sawtell Boulevard has now become a destination for people who like Asian foods, and so it's a very bustling area in addition. And so we thank you if you're able to approve this petition for us. Thank you.
My name is Ted Tanaka. I'm also here to support Mike Bonan's complete unrestricted endorsement of the signage, Sawtell Boulevard, which is literally my life. I was born and raised there, lived first 25 years in Sawtell, except during World War II. And to this day, at my age of 75, I patronize the retailers and am involved with nonprofit organizations in Sawtell, which has been my entire life. I'd like to note that you may have heard of a Buddhist folk street dance called Obon, and it is held annually, and it is not faded, it's actually grown. It's one of the largest Obon street folk dancing of the Buddhist religion in the mainland United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Lynn, why don't you come on and have a seat?
Good afternoon, Greg Erickson. I'm a board member with the West LA Sawtell Neighborhood Council. I'm a newer board member to the Neighborhood Council, and I've had the opportunity throughout the last year to really learn about the history of my neighborhood, and I've also seen it slowly become eroded through development, and I think it's important that we recognize this area for its history and its culture that it brings to our neighborhood, and also the fact that this can create a lot of synergy for our neighborhood to engage more residents and to build support for our neighborhood and to continue to get people more involved. And I think doing that by giving a nod to the past but also looking forward to what Sawtell can offer, I think is really important. So I encourage you to support this petition. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilman Parks and O'Farrell. My name is Ron Cato. I'm the Executive Director of the MOA Wellness Center on the west side. Outside of this area, but I was born and raised in this area. My parents still own a home there. Third generation of farming immigrants. And to give continuance to what the pioneers did, I think it's important for the younger generations, as the sceneries change with each generation, for them to recognize the roots. And a lot of that Japanese culture is to be of service. The West LA Gardeners Association, they volunteer their time to build a Japanese garden, plant the cherry trees for the whole neighborhood to enjoy at Stoner Park within this area. And I know that, the future there, right across Santa Monica Boulevard is the VA, where, a lot of things have to be done. And I think with these roots of service, get the community together, look forward to, giving greater service in a greater area would be something nice if you can consider this name change. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. For the record, my name is Len Nguyen, last name Nguyen, and I'm representing council member Mike Bonin in support of this Sawtell Japantown designation. The community has overcome early persecution with tremendous resilience to become an American and Los Angeles success story. While colloquially known under many names, the city has never formally voted to designate this Sawtelle Japantown community. So after Councilmember Bonin took office, we worked with the Sawtelle Japantown Association, which organized, and we went to various meetings and did a lot of outreach to discuss the name. And the Sawtelle Japantown name came about because it is a historic name. It pays homage to the historic roots. This area used to be the city of Sawtelle before it became Los Angeles, and they clearly said they wanted Japan to be a part of the name. So that's how we came up with Sawtelle Japantown. Thank you.
Just, Dr. Fujimoto, thank you for this book. I have a whole collection of Arcadia Publishing books. I love these.
Lynn?
And I just want to say these pictures that you've submitted as well are both, I don't know, really incredibly emotion-evoking and also awe-inspiring. I've had the benefit of having many, many friends who were lived at Manzanar at one point during the war. And I have many friends whose parents lived through this horrific experience. And just these pictures, the way they depict just complete transcendence of this incredible violation. And the fact that you are active and defining this community and valuing its history and its culture and the strength of the Japanese American community, I think, is just so incredibly important and noteworthy, and clearly justified. So I just really commend all of you for doing this, and then our colleague Mike Bonin and Lynn for helping this along. This is really so important. I mean, Los Angeles is such, it's, what would you call it? Well, it has such rich diversity, and these neighborhoods really tell the story of what Los Angeles is all about, its past and its promise. So I really commend all of the efforts to create Sawtelle Japantown. Well done.
I just wanted to, I may have missed it, but the comment, Bonnet's in the letter, if you could just kind of comment on what his letter and support for.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, the council member's letter is in support of, it just gives a little background with regards to the history of the Japanese American migration to the community, arriving in Los Angeles around the 1890s. And they basically ended up here because that's where they could live. And they created basic cultural institutions to support each other. And they have become the core of the Japanese community out here. And so the council member wanted to support the achievements of the West LA Japanese American community by supporting the Sawtelle Japantown designation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've been verified that all of the legal requirements have been met.
Yes, sir.
We'll move this item to council. Do we have a date of when?
We can schedule it next Wednesday, sir.
Next Wednesday? Thank you very much. We'll
Thank you, council members.
Approved. Item 6.
Item 6 is the city attorney report relative to a draft ordinance amending section 22.801J of the Los Angeles Administrative Code to establish and maintain a neighborhood council database for public use.
Mr. Schaeffer, you have a comment on that?
Thank you. I believe we sent a letter in support of this from the commission. This came out of our working groups, and basically what it is it's a database that would be compiled by IT and the department so that someone looking for current and past memos, city attorney opinions, and such as that would be able to find them all in one place. That would be going forward from this point. So we would support this particular ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, We have other cards, Ms. Patricia Bell Hurst, Mr. Kuiper. All right, we've done this. Oh, public, I'm sorry.
General?
I'm sorry, don't move. All right. Okay, let me ask, Gracie, could you come up on item 6? I just had a couple of questions. On the ordinance, have we decided or who's going to be responsible for maintaining the system and also the funding and the cost of the network? Is that going to be ITA? Is that going to be city clerk? How's that going to be dealt with?
Gracie Lee, General Manager for the Department of Empowerment. We did have a meeting with ITA last week to discuss this matter. Currently, the department maintains our website, and we plan to add this additional information onto the website. So it would be our cost and
It would be done?
the department's, yes, the department's cost, and then ITA supports us just in terms of our basic IT services, but our website is outside of ITA's
So you'd be maintaining, updating, and the initial cost of maintenance?
Correct, for items 1 through 4. And then items 5 is something in regards to providing a citywide database of existing neighborhood organizations and similar information, sortable by areas and individual neighborhood councils. We did discuss that because we don't have that currently, and it looks like it might require map overlays that ITA and the department would be looking to perhaps partner on that.
Partner number 5?
Correct. That's something that we still have to kind of sort out. We might try to piggyback on current websites that are outside the city, such as healthycities.org, that may have some of this information already, rather than recreating an entire new database.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you, did we just forward, because we don't have a quorum, just forward this?
It's a communication from the chair.
Communication. Okay, we're going to forward this as a communication, basically approving, not approving, but forwarding the ordinance to council. The other issue is that I want to clarify that Dunn would be responsible solely for items 1 through 4, and we'd encourage ITA to work with Dunn as relates to implementing number 5.
Yes, thank you.
So that's what's in it as a communication. Thank you. Public comment? All right. Mr. Schaeffer, Elsie Selznick, Tut Hayes, William Huntsman. And the last two would be Ms. Hurst and Mr. Kuiper. The first 4?
I think most have gone. Very briefly, a while back, Mr. Parks, you requested an overview and letter from the commission with regards to the recommendations made by our working groups. We have sent one to you. You should be able to get it. At our last meeting, we approved it. It sets forth
When did you send it to us?
It's dated February 12th because of when our meeting was, which was the 12th.
We'll look for that.
Okay, and it sets out all 17 of the recommendations along with the charts as to what kind of support it got when we did our outreach after the working groups, and the 4 priorities that the commission identified, not that we want to abandon the others, but the 4 priorities amongst those that aren't done that we identified. So hopefully this will help you with the overview that you wanted to have.
Thank you very much. Is Delcy Selnick?
Denise is no longer
here. Okay. Move that. Mr. Hayes.
Carnegie Whitson formulated February as Black History Month, during the month of Lincoln's birthday and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. The City Council, including Councilman Parks, decided to take Black History Month and retitle it Black Heritage Month, because that goes together with Gay and Lesbian Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month, but Carter said history, not heritage. The City Council cannot demote Black history to heritage. on a whim because it coincides with other ethnic groups or racial groups or sexual preferences. That's wrong. You have to do something to change that. I'm not sure yet. Over 100 motorists and pedestrians have been killed by the blue line level crossing since 1990, and there have been more than 800 collisions, making it easily the deadliest and most collision-prone line in the country.
Unfortunately, that's not within our purview of our committee, but I appreciate the information. Mr. Kuiper.
Yes. My name is Bruce Kuiper. I'm a stakeholder.
You can't stop criticism.
Oh, no, can't. But I can advise you that the committee has no authority. So you appreciate the information.
Hi, I'm Bruce Kuiper. I'm a stakeholder in the Bel Air, Beverly Crest Community Plan area. I'd like to ask, I know you don't have to answer it, why this committee hasn't met for 11 months.
We've had nothing on the agenda.
Well, you canceled your January meeting, and a lot of these items were for January.
I think as the chair, I get to make that decision. And if we have nothing that's worthy of a committee, we will not have one.
Okay.
We will not have people come down here just to sit and say there's nothing on the agenda.
Well, you could get a department report. You could have public comments,
That's true.
right? And council rule.
I still think that's my call. And when we have something for the agenda, we'll deal with it.
Okay. What authority for your call? Because Council Rule 67 says
So
all.
let me just go over, save you some time. The chair of the committee sets the agenda. Okay? We will not have a meeting unless there's an agenda to be discussed. Okay?
Okay, just can you tell me what council rule that is? Because 67 says you're supposed to meet every month.
Let me go over again. As the chair of the committee, we set the agenda. If there is no agenda, we won't have a meeting. Okay?
Okay, and I'm asking you for the authority for that in the charter or the council rules or the bylaws of the committee.
Chair of the committee.
What
set the
document
agenda.
gives you that authority?
That's the chair of the committee. Okay?
Okay, what city document says the chair of the
Chair,
committee?
I'm just giving it to you. You can go do research it.
I will.
Chair of the committee, I set the agenda, and we will not have a meeting unless there are items to discuss.
What gives you that authority is what I'm asking.
It's the chair of the committee. Anything else? You're wasting your time. Got 13 seconds.
Because you don't have these meetings, that's why you have these long agendas and you lose quorum.
There's not a long
And I think
agenda.
you should.
So let us run this, and you can come and comment. Okay? Thank you. Ms. Hurst?
Hi. I just have a question. If the last meeting was in March, in 11 months, nothing happened in Dunn?
Nothing that came to the committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Kuzman? Okay. We've exhausted the public comment cards. Appreciate everybody showing up, and the meeting's adjourned.